Hey everyone, welcome back. So let's talk about a word that gets thrown around all the time: entrepreneurship. We're going to strip away all the hype, get down to the real core of what it means using a pretty fantastic framework from our source material. You ready? Let's dive in. Okay, so when I say the word entrepreneur, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it some tech genius in a hoodie, maybe a contestant on Shark Tank, or, a larger-than-life CEO? And yeah, those images, they're part of the story, for sure. But they don't even begin to capture the whole picture. The reality is actually way more fundamental and honestly a lot more accessible to all of us. See, that's because entrepreneurship isn't just about building startups or making billions of dollars. When you get right down to it, it's a specific practice, a set of actions, a way of thinking that you can actually learn and apply. And this whole practice, it really stands on three core pillars. All right, let's kick things off with pillar number one, the spark of creation. I love this name for it. This is the absolute beginning of the journey, right? It's that initial flash, that moment an idea is born just from looking at the world around you and thinking, hey, there's gotta be a better way. So you can think of this pillar as the what and the why behind the whole venture. It's not just some random idea that pops into your head. No, it's a creative response to a real-world problem or a gap in the market. It's all about seeing what's missing and then imagining, okay, how could I fill that space? In these components, they all work together. It kicks off with innovation. A new product, a new method, something fresh. That innovation is what lets an entrepreneur fill a gap between what people need and what's actually available. But here's the key. It has to be unique. It can't just be a copycat. And all of this, every single bit of it, is driving toward one single goal: creating real, tangible value. Peter Drucker just nailed this whole idea of value creation. He said, until the entrepreneurial act, every plant is a seed and every mineral just another rock. Wow. Think about that. In other words, an entrepreneur is someone who can look at a simple resource and see its hidden potential and then actually transform it into something useful for other people. Okay, so a spark is great. It's essential. But a spark is just a spark, right? It'll just fizzle out unless you build something to harness that energy. So that brings us right to our second pillar, the engine of action. This is where the talk stops and the walk begins. This is where ideas get real. So if the first pillar was all about the what and the why, this one is the how. This is the disciplined, practical, roll-up-your-sleeves kind of work. It's about building an actual system, an organization, an enterprise that can deliver on the promise of that initial spark. And it's definitely a process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. First, somebody has to take the initiative to actually get the ball rolling. Then comes the organizing part. The classic job of pulling together the resources, the land, the labor, the capital. That then leads to real economic activity, creating and distributing stuff. And let's be real, none of this works without some serious managerial skill to lead the team and build a culture where people can actually get things done. So really, when you boil it all down, this pillar tells us something huge. An entrepreneur is so much more than an innovator. They're an organization builder. It's not just about creating a cool product. It's about creating the entire system needed to make it, deliver it, and keep it going. Okay, so we've got our spark, and we've built our engine. But what keeps that engine from just stalling out? What keeps it running and running faster? Well, an engine needs fuel. And that brings us to our third and final pillar, the fuel of growth. This one is all about mindset. It's the philosophy that powers that engine forward. It's a way of looking at the world where change isn't something scary, it's an opportunity. It's about looking at an uncertain future and not just accepting it, but embracing it and having that internal drive to just constantly push for more. And this mindset has a few key ingredients. First off, risk. Bearing risk is just part of the game. But we're not talking about blind gambling here. It's calculated risk, backed up by knowledge and experience. This mindset is also super dynamic, always looking for an edge as the world changes. And maybe most importantly, there is a relentless, nonstop focus on growth, on finding that next opportunity, that next market. And this focus on growth, this is the single biggest thing that separates a true entrepreneurial venture from, say, a small business. And there's nothing wrong with a small business. It can be super successful staying in its lane. But a real entrepreneurial venture, it's defined by that constant hunt for new opportunities. It's never, ever static. And this is where that Drucker quote from earlier just ties it all together so perfectly. He said entrepreneurship is neither a science nor an art. It is a practice. It's not some magic you're born with, and it's not a rigid formula. It's a practice. Something you do, something you learn, and something you absolutely get better at the more you do it. Okay, so let's recap real quick. We've got our three pillars: the spark of creation, the engine of action, and the fuel of growth. But here's what might be the most powerful idea of this entire explainer. This framework isn't just for business. Not at all. This is a universal practice. Yep, you heard that right. It doesn't matter if you're working inside a giant corporation, a nonprofit, or even just organizing a project in your own community, these principles apply. That fundamental need for creation, for action, and for growth, it's absolutely everywhere. I mean, think about it. The entrepreneurial practice can thrive in so many different places. A social enterprise trying to tackle homelessness, it needs the exact same spark, the same engine, and the same fuel as a high-flying tech startup. The end goals might look totally different, but the core practice, it's exactly the same. So here's the big takeaway. Entrepreneurship isn't some exclusive club. It's a fundamental human activity. It's about creating value and building for the future. And it is a practice that's available to anyone, anywhere. Which really just leaves us with one final question. A question for you. Now that you have the framework, what problem will you solve?